Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. Is infidelity a genetic disease? My boss, Jim Wright, told me to take a short tour of the hotel so that I could see how extensive the electrical upgrades should be. In the meantime, he was supposed to meet with the owners of the hotel in their office. I walked around the pool in a smart way, not letting anyone know that I was trying my best to capture all the cleavage I could. It was then that I saw a red-haired fox in her early 40s chatting with a man who was obviously several years younger than her. They pulled their deck chairs closer to each other, and the man put his hand on her left knee. At the same time, his elbow was constantly in contact with the lady's generously shaped left breast. I immediately hurried away from the pool, relaxing only when I was out of sight of the vacationers by the pool. I thought about my options for 20 seconds. Instinctively, I knew what I needed to do, but I didn't think about the consequences for a while. And I saw only one decent course of action. Taking out his mobile phone, he sent a short message to his boss, and he carefully made his way back to the pool, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. I was standing in the shadow of the upper balcony with my phone's camera display on. Slowly counting to 25, he began to take off the pair he had noticed earlier. Now the woman was lying on a chaise longue with her top unbuttoned, and the man was slowly applying sunscreen on her back, paying special attention to the impressive area of her chest, which protruded from under her torso and was spectacularly exposed. I was shooting the video for only a few seconds when a clearly enraged man ran up to the couple. He grabbed a handful of the lotion master's hair and ruthlessly yanked his head back. At the same time, the man's chin and throat were exposed. I easily heard the bang when the angry man's fist met Romeo's throat. This was immediately followed by a second blow, this time to the man's chin. The man who a few seconds ago was courting a sensual red-haired woman was now lying on the side of the pool, making terrible gagging sounds, and blood was oozing from his mouth onto the pool deck. Everything happened so fast that the woman barely had time to look back to see a very angry man rubbing his fist as he stood over her. It lasted a few seconds before he grabbed her by the red curls. "Jim!" was all she managed to blurt out before he pulled her to her feet by the hair on her head. "You fucking fool!" was all he could manage, looking at his wife's panic-stricken face and then down at her free breasts. I was afraid for a moment that he was going to hit her, but fortunately he controlled his anger and just pushed her back into the pool. Then he threw several chairs and plastic tables across the deck before he saw me standing to the side. He hunched his shoulders noticeably and then moved awkwardly in my direction. "Mike, take me to the fucking truck before I end up in jail," was all he could manage as tears streamed down his cheeks. I took Jim to the parking lot of the company truck. By this time, he had turned into a real zombie, and while I was driving along the freeway, he showed no emotion and looked straight ahead. The 2-hour drive home was eerily silent, except for the occasional guttural sounds coming out of Jim's throat. I parked in the driveway and walked him home. Jim was sitting at the kitchen table while I took 2 beers out of the fridge. I put one in front of him and discovered the other for myself. Then he sat down on the chair opposite him. His unwavering gaze made me feel more than a little uneasy. I looked into his eyes for a few seconds before asking, "Did we get the contract?" Jim blinked at my question before suddenly bursting into laughter. "You dumb bastard," was all he muttered as he opened the beer and took a long sip. Maybe my question was stupid, but it brought Jim out of his trance. This lying fool told me that she was going to spend a few days with her mother at her parents' house on the lake. She left yesterday morning. She's probably been making love to that damn Harris since yesterday. Damn it. I called her mother's cabin this morning and asked her to talk to Kelly. Her mom told me she's in the shower, but she'll ask her to call in a few minutes. Kelly called about 10 minutes later. If she was in her mother's bathroom at the lake at 10 o'clock in the morning, there's no way in the world she could have gotten to Timberbrook by the time you found her with that bastard Harris. And this indicates that her mother was covering for her, I reasoned. That means her mother knew what the hell Kelly was doing and covered for her. Jim repeated my words. Damn it. She's been visiting her mother at the cottage every summer since we got married. Now I have to wonder how long this shit has been going on and if he was the first or just one of many. Jim had an interesting point of view, and I looked at it from all possible angles as I drove home. It seemed possible and even probable that Jim's wife was aided and abetted by her own mother. Could it be an inherited trait or just some kind of weakness that has been nurtured for generations? When I pulled into the driveway, I saw my mother-in-law's car. I didn't want to listen to her nonsense, so I parked and walked to the back door, knowing that my wife Tracy would be sitting at the kitchen table drinking wine with her mother. As usual, I was right. The only thing I didn't expect was the volume of the conversation. Well, to be honest, both the intensity and the content of the conversation were a bit shocking. Holy shit, Mom. Tracy was practically yelling at her mother. You know how much Dad hates the one-liners. What the hell were you thinking? I couldn't help but feel a little proud of Tracy's indignation at her mother's actions. She and I have sworn to be faithful throughout our married life. Tracy and I definitely agreed on this issue. Please don't call Bentley that. It was an accident. Besides, he's still capable of performing pretty well, Kelly insisted. It wasn't an accident, Tracy replied. You were walking in broad daylight with another man, instead of Dad, and only 2 hours away from home. I warned you not to let your guard down, but you did it anyway. I thought we were far enough away from home to be safe. I do not know why your father was there or how he found us by the pool. He never goes to hotels, much less to their pools. Do you think he's cheating on me? No, I do not know, Tracy replied. Dad adores you. He would never cheat, and I'm sure he had no idea you were cuckolding him. That's why his reaction was so violent. Bentley only rubbed lotion on the sides of my chest, Kelly said. He was a real gentleman. I'm sure that's how it was. His father punched him in the throat and then broke his jaw for no reason. How are you going to handle this, Mom? It looks like Dad is really angry. I'd like to stay with you for a few days until your father calms down, if you don't mind. You know how much Jim adores me. He'll get over this little mistake. Maybe until he finds out about your other mistakes, Tracy suggested. You know it wouldn't have ended well. Did Kelly make other mistakes, as Tracy called them? Did my wife know about them? She didn't seem very surprised that her mom was with him. This information was disturbing. Not wanting them to know that I was in the house and eavesdropping on their conversation, I quietly left through the back door and walked around the front of the house. Mother and daughter fell silent as soon as the door opened. I nodded to the now silent duo, went to the fridge, and took out a beer. It occurred to me that they had no idea how much I knew about the events of the day and were waiting for me to somehow show my knowledge. But I turned around and went upstairs to take a shower. They should have been interested in how much I know, how I would react, what I would say, and who I would tell. However, I decided to leave them guessing. The whole situation was damned unpleasant, and Tracy's role in it was disturbing to say the least. It struck me that Tracy obviously knew that her mom was promiscuous, but she never mentioned it to her father or me. Keeping such a secret was the same as lying, as far as I could tell. I had just finished changing when Tracy came into the bedroom. Mom and Dad had a little fight today. Mom wants to stay with us for a few days until they settle their differences. I told her I agreed. I hope you don't mind. What kind of husband would I be if I objected to my wife's mother staying for a few days? I asked rhetorically. Your parents deserve special attention. Look how kind your father was to me. He's a really great guy. Tracy seemed to be studying my face for any hint of my feelings. When I mentioned her father, she flinched slightly, but maybe it was my imagination. That's one of the reasons I love you so much, Mike. You always treat me and my family like we're special, Tracy replied. I've been working with your father for 5 years now. I knew him before I met you, and he's special. He gave me my first real job. He's a good boss, a great father-in-law, and the best father a girl could ever have. For some reason, Tracy didn't seem to like my praise of her father as much as she should have. I had never noticed this before, but now it seemed to me that Tracy felt some guilt about her mother's extramarital antics. Did I just not notice anything before? Kelly spent half of dinner asking me questions about work. She wanted to know what projects we were doing, what we were betting on, and where I was working that day. It was obvious that she was trying to figure out how much I knew and how Jim ended up in the same hotel where she had ordered a special dish with him the night before. I avoided any mention of Jim being asked to do the upgrade work at the Blood Hotel or of my role in the denouement at the swimming pool. I decided that my wife and her mother weren't the only people who might have secrets. After dinner, I announced that I was going to mow the lawn. As my suspicions dominated my thoughts, I secretly left my phone in recording mode behind a banana on the kitchen table, away from the dishwasher. It was getting dark when I finished cleaning the mower. Both women were watching Survivors on TV in the living room. I put the phone in my pocket and wished them good night before going upstairs to the master bedroom. Then I listened to a recorded conversation between my wife and my mother after I left home. To put it mildly, it opened my eyes. The two women conspired to get Jim's forgiveness. They came up with a few ideas, but mostly it came down to Kelly using Jim stupidly for as long as it took him to completely forgive and trust his wayward wife. "You're hiding your eyes. Don't tell me he used Grandma. She's about 62 or so," Tracy declared with obvious amazement. "That was a couple of years ago, and I hope to look as good as Mom when I'm her age," Kelly said. "It really turns Bentley on when he talks about sleeping with a mother-daughter combination. He even wanted me to ask if he could do a hat trick with you. Not many men have 3 generations of family. Are you kidding me? He's almost as old as Dad, and he only has one nut," Tracy said. "I can't even imagine being with him." "Let's just say you won't be disappointed," Kelly replied as if she had recommended a good hairdresser. "Just make sure I'm not rocking Bentley's little grandson on my lap." "I've never cheated on Mike, and I certainly wouldn't start with one nut," Tracy said. "I want Mike to be the father of all our children. That's the only thing I'll take care of. I love this guy. I love your father too. That's why it's all so difficult." "I don't want a divorce," Kelly insisted. "He just works so many hours and comes home very tired. We are lucky that we make love a couple of times a week. That's why I needed the Bentley." "Really, Mom? What about George Marsh, Jeff Stevens, and God knows who else? I don't like the way this conversation is developing. Let's go see the survivors." "I think this fat-assed Italian woman will be voted on this week," Kelly said in an apparent attempt to change the subject. I saved the conversation to a flash drive and went to bed, knowing that I would get very little sleep that night. I had a lot to think about. The next day's work was excruciating. Jim was in a complete mess when he handed out work assignments to start the day. There were 5 of us who worked at Wright Electric, and we exchanged glances as Jim stammered through his instructions. As usual, Jim and I were working together on our current project, so he climbed into the passenger seat of the company's truck. We were conducting electrical wiring in a house under construction, so we could talk freely without fear that someone would overhear us. As soon as Jim started telling me about his situation, he continued talking all morning. I guess it was cathartic for him, but it confused my mental state even more. It was difficult for me to reconcile what I had heard from my wife and her mother with the future I had imagined. Will Tracy eventually become a traveling wife, like her mother and, presumably, her grandmother? Will I have enough influence in her life to keep her faithful? Was it worth risking a failed marriage or living the life of a cuckold? "Kelly called me this morning," Jim began. "She told me she wanted to apologize for maybe giving me the impression that she was cheating on me with Bentley. She calls that bastard Bentley. She said it was the only time she had ever cheated or even been close to it. He chased her for months, and she finally succumbed to his charm, and he scored an amazing goal." I asked how long her mother had been covering up her cases, and she started stuttering. It never occurred to her that it was obvious to me that her mother was lying about her whereabouts. We exchanged a few unpleasant words, and I hung up the phone. I didn't know if I should have given Jim the information I had gleaned from my eavesdropping. If he decided to make peace, it would only make the situation worse. I decided to give him time to decide for himself, but I did it in a decisive way. "Jim, you need to take your time and find out what's really going on. Maybe it was the first time, and maybe it wasn't. I suggest you think about the situation and weigh all the consequences of your decision, whether you leave Kelly or throw her on the sidelines. I feel sorry for you, Mike. You're married to my daughter, but you work with me, so you're in the middle of this mess. I feel like I've wasted 25 years of my life. If it wasn't for Tracy, I'd say my married life was a pointless sham. Having a wonderful daughter and a reliable son-in-law is the only saving grace." I was still undecided about my next course of action when I returned home that evening. As soon as I entered the kitchen, Tracy and her mother attacked me from all sides. "Dad told Mom that you were the one who told him that Mom was in the pool with Bentley," Tracy declared with great anger. What kind of asshole would try to ruin his wife's parents' marriage? Really? And what do you think I should have done? I asked, more calmly than I really felt. You could have told me Jim was nearby and gotten the hell out of the pool, Kelly interjected. That would be gentlemanly. I could see the worry on Tracy's face as she considered my words. I've never cheated on you, and I never would. I'm not like Mom and Grandma. I try to help them keep their nasty secrets, but I didn't like it. I kept telling them to stop their affairs and be faithful to their husbands. Did you say that? Kelly asked before Tracy could give her a murderous look. Oh, yes, that's what she said. Kelly suddenly agreed as understanding of Tracy's plight gripped her. She said she would never cheat on you and insisted that Mom and I start following the rules of loyalty. I was wrong to let Bentley seduce me, but it will never happen again. I've learned my lesson. I swear it. Tracy, did you tell Mike about George and Jeff? Did you turn your back on me to save yourself? Kelly demanded. How could Mike find out about them if you didn't tell him? Oh, no. Then Kelly howled. Did you tell Jim about George and Jeff? What about Bill Simons? Does Jim know about him too? Not yet, I replied with a smile. The next day at work was interesting because of all the life-changing decisions. I told Jim everything I had overheard, what his wife and daughter were talking about. He was mad as hell, and then incredibly depressed. I don't see a choice, Mike. I'm going to contact a lawyer and get a divorce. Don't try to talk me out of it. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied gloomily. I thought we could use the same lawyer and maybe get a higher rate. But Tracy said she never cheated on you, Jim objected. You have no reason to divorce Tracy. She loves you. I know that's the case. I know that Kelly loves you, and I wouldn't try to talk you out of a divorce. You're the one who helped me make the decision, Jim. If I didn't have your wisdom and experience, I might have been tempted to stay with Tracy. You told me that you turned out to have wasted 25 years being married to a fraud. I don't want to be in the same situation in 23 years. I no longer have any trust in your daughter. I know damn well that Tracy will insist on letting Kelly and Kelly's mother see our children and influence their lives. Leaving Tracy alone with my daughters would make me worried, but letting your wife and her mother even talk to them scares the hell out of me, I confessed. You understand why I can't keep going down this path, don't you? For years later, I decided to invite my wife Amber out for our second anniversary. Our daughter Megan was 6 months old, and Amber's parents were more than happy to keep her overnight. Since it was our anniversary, I spent money on a room at the Ritz Hotel, which was almost 100 miles away. I had booked a table for dinner and was looking forward to showing my wife how much her love meant to me. I asked for a private table and was pleased when we were shown into a rather dark corner of the hall. After we ordered food and exchanged a few funny jokes, Amber suddenly straightened up and stared at the entrance. Isn't that your ex-wife? What is it? She asked. I remember that she was 2 years older than me at school and looked like a model. She's still beautiful. I heard that she got married again, but I've never seen her husband. He looks like he's a little older than her. Actually, he's the same age as Tracy, I replied, turning to see my ex-wife sitting across the room. Well, he had a hard life then. He looks old enough to be her father, Amber remarked. It's not her husband. This guy only has one ball, I replied with a sigh. I made the right decision 4 years ago. Being with you and seeing Tracy now fills me with relief and joy. What does her husband look like? Amber asked when her curiosity was piqued. He looks exactly like a guy walking in the door with a baseball bat in his hand, I replied, mentally thanking my lucky stars.